Hey guys, how you doing today? Just got off work, just grabbed some groceries. On my way home, gonna do this recording, give my dog a walk, make some food for the week. I've been finding that I eat out. It's way too easy to eat out, right? Like it's way too easy to just like grab some Subway or grab there's this real great burrito place just down the way. Oh, it kills me. You get what you pay for with them, but it's good. But even if you're spending $10 a day, eating out, boy, does that add up. I just went to the grocery store, picked up all the ingredients I need for the stew that I'm about to make. It's going to cost me probably $30 altogether for everything that I'm going to use, but I'm going to eat that for the whole week. So it drops my costs down by about half, right? Pretty considerably. And it's super easy to make. Cut up a bunch of vegetables, throw in a pot. You're ready to go. Can't complain. I recommend it to everybody in these trying times. So, what's banging around in my head today? Lots of things, man. Lots of things. It just seems like everything's just kind of going along. Nobody gives a crap, right? You know what I really want to talk about today? I'm tired of talking about kind of the daily what's going on. I want to talk about something a bit more substantial today. I'm going to label this video, "The Left Needs to Reclaim the Bible." How's that for a topic of conversation? So, my background is evangelical Christianity. I was a far-right conservative growing up. I was raised as a far-right conservative. It really goes to show you how much of a failure I consider the conservative ideology to be, that now I'm a communist, right? And I didn't become a communist through my university. I became a communist through my working career. And and growing up, I really came to realize, the right has claimed the Bible and thereby all of its moral teachings and what it has to say or teach. It's claimed it as its own when the reality is their interpretation of it and their usage of it is not only wrong. If you actually follow any kind of theological way of thinking, it's heretical. And I actually think that the most powerful thing that we should be doing to the Christian fascists and the right-wingers that exist here in Canada is to quote scripture at them. I think that lots of the stuff that they say can be defeated with a single verse or a single passage. But the left has been so alienated. And this has been done purposefully, honestly. The left has been alienated from the Bible, from the text, from this theological and moral tradition. And it's been done on a systematic basis, right? First of all, the insistence that the Bible should be written not as a narrative, to be understood as a narrative document, an unfolding and an ever-changing and constantly evolving narrative document. Instead, it has to be interpreted as a literal document, which is to say that Jesus was a wizard capable of magical powers. And you have to accept that's factually true. And that the Bible was written, by the hand of God and is this perfect document, instead of a piece of our history that is in this ever-changing and unfolding flux. So, for example, one of the easiest ones to really talk about is the sacrifice of. I'm going to completely blank on the name right when I needed to. Oh well, I'll just make up the names then. So Bill is going to sacrifice his son because God told him to. His son Joe. And this is an Old Testament story. one that atheists and the like really love to point at and go, guffaw, 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 look how backwards and all this the Bible is, instead of realizing, no, this is the Bible chronicling how backwards humans are. And that we're keeping track of how backwards humans were so that we can see how far we've come through time. That's the purpose of a document like the Bible. To really realize, like, okay, there was a time when people were sacrificing their children, right? And the end of this story is that as Bob goes to sacrifice his son, God shows up and says, no, you don't need to do that anymore. And so what you're actually seeing is the evolution of humanity away from a human sacrifice belief system. That they used to believe that you had to sacrifice children, now they don't. And here's a story that shows that shift in the consciousness of humanity. And this, to me, is how the Bible is to be understood, right? That you're supposed to understand the Bible as a document that shows where humanity has gone, and how humanity has grown, and how humanity has, and where humanity can return. So, the story of Jesus Christ is actually like, if you were to read it strictly as a narrative, forget about the sacred element, forget about the like worship of it all, that Christ is just a character in a story, right? Basically, you have a guy who was nice to people who needed to be treated nicely, and was a real jerk to people who needed to be treated badly. So capitalists, basically. He smashed up temples. He got into philosophical discussions with the frauds and heretics of the day, and defeated them resoundingly, consistently, showing them as the frauds and liars that they were. And they didn't care for that very much. And so they crucified him when they had the opportunity. Now, we don't have crucifixion any longer, thanks to the Christian movement. Christianity was abolished thanks to the Christian movement, and has never returned. Like, to give you a sense of how pervasive crucifixion was as a policy in the Roman state, Spartacus. We all remember Spartacus, right? At the end of the Third Servile War, Spartacus was defeated by the Romans, and they crucified 10,000 men along the major port, starting at the major port to the city of Rome. So that meant that as slaves entered the Roman capital to be sold, they would walk down a road that was that had upon it rows upon rows of crucifixes, where the soldiers who fought alongside Spartacus were crucified. That happened in the Third Servile War, which is the third slave uprising. Historically speaking, if we were to find analogies in our modern culture, Occupy Wall Street was the first Servile War. Here we are, we're about to head into the Second Servile War. And I don't believe that it's going to be an exact thing. So for all we know, at the end of this uprising or civil war that's upon us, we're going to see some kind of action like this mass crucifixion that occurred after the defeat of Spartacus. And the cross becomes the symbol of subjugation. It becomes the symbol of oppression. And the Christians begin to use the cross. They claim the cross as their own symbol, to put it back in the face of their oppressors and to say to them, we will never allow anyone to forget what this culture has done and what you have done to the people who lived in it. Rome was a very advanced society. It was technologically advanced. They had a robust cultural scene. They were very wealthy, and they were barbarians. They were brutal, torturing sociopaths who would literally, if you were a slave and you were going to give testimony in their court system, you had to, by law, be tortured. You had to be tortured, or else your testimony was considered inadmissible. This is the sociopathic nature of the Roman state at the time, which I am seeing now today on the same level here in America. The Christ-like figures that exist in our society are people like Edward Snowden, are people like Julian Assange, whose crimes seem to be telling people the truth. That as long as you keep your head down and commit war crimes or commit treason against your own people, you're completely safe in America. But if you stand up and simply tell the truth about what's happening, you will be crucified. Now, they haven't gone so far as to publicly torture people to death, which is what crucifixion is. But certainly, like, Julian Assange was isolated. It's been like 7 years. Like, it's been a long, long time. And isolation is torture. Like, it's a form of torture. There's a big reason why people are avoiding this lockdown, right? Because they know it's isolating and they know it feels bad and they know, like, isolation is torture. They know that. That's just the truth. And so they're avoiding it, right? They don't want... They feel like they're in this no-win choice situation. My position is we need to be locking down again, and that things can be done to avoid the feeling of isolation. But that's neither here nor there for this conversation. But what I'm talking about with Christ and the history of Rome and all of this conversation simply doesn't happen on the left. People are unaware that the story of Christ is actually shockingly relevant to what's happening. That the truth tellers in our society, there already is a time where the truth tellers in the society are being persecuted, standing up and telling the basic truth about what your society looks like, what it's doing, can earn you massive repercussions and blowback. You can be imprisoned like Chelsea Manning was. You can be imprisoned and put in isolation and treated like you're like Osama bin Laden level terrorist if all you do is reveal the active war crimes that your government is involved in. And we live in this very precarious moment where the people who are most heavily involved in the capitalist death cult have seized the culture's primary moral document and have claimed it as their own, but they don't read it or follow anything it has to say, and nobody on the left is reading it and actively attempting to understand what it has to say. People on the left get very caught up in some of the outdated language of the Bible, right? They claim that the Bible uses, that it supports slavery, instead of just simply acknowledging that slavery existed and that the Bible exists as a document that is growing out of humanity and is part of human evolution, right? Like, looking back on some of the sentiments in the Bible which talk about slavery and talk about how slaves need to exist in the society they exist in, is a lot, and saying like, oh, this diminishes the Bible as some kind of source to be used, is a lot like looking at a baby who's crawling on the ground and saying, what an idiot. He should just get up on its feet and walk around. What a stupid person, crawling around on the floor like that. And that's generally what people sound like when they say that kind of stuff to me. Like, people can't suddenly not be slaves, right? You live in a society that enslaves people, right? And then somebody stands up and says, okay, well, you're a slave. There's nothing we can do about it. Spartacus and his soldiers were literally crucified for attempting to free the slaves. So you're a slave. So maybe this is how you should act as a slave, because you are going to be one. And the left stands up and says, the Bible acknowledges slavery. I'm like, you're an idiot. Like, if that's the way that you're thinking, there's actually time to wake up, buddy. Like, acknowledging that slavery exists and attempting to give advice to the slaves who cannot be freed because the military force that was attempting to do so was crucified. I mean, to say that that's a bad thing to do, I think you've got to be out to lunch. And the Bible has these moments, right? Because the culture was a slave society. It was a slave culture, right? Like, I mean, what can you do? Like, what did you want the Bible to say? Slaves stand up and try to murder your masters? They tried that. Spartacus tried that. It failed. So there's no military hope for these people. It's not going to happen. And we're going to find ourselves in a very similar position very soon, right? Well, and if you're honest about your position in the society, you already find yourself in that position, right? You can't stand up and suddenly declare, oh, I'm not going to be a wage slave anymore. You're not going to do that, right? You're not suddenly going to be able to, like, you're living on the streets and suddenly you're just going to, you know what, I'm just going to own a piece of property and start a business. Like, what are you fucking talking about? And that's what these people sound like when they start talking about the Bible or any of that kind of stuff. And why I think this is useful to do, right, is not only does it give us a sense of our own morality or our own ethical systems, it allows us to see that this story has unfolded before, right? Like, as the capitalists continue to abandon and enslave their own citizenry, and as the society collapses and becomes worse, and as things get worse for the mass of the population, we have to start trying to find a way to live with one another peacefully, because we are simply not going to be able to overwhelm our oppressors through military force. Like Spartacus and his soldiers who were crucified, we are facing a force that has military jets and nuclear bombs. Like, we're not going to be able to defeat that with military force. Woe to him that tries. Like, and once they start doing modern equivalents of crucifixion in public, we're going to have to find ways to communicate these ideas about why we should treat one another well, and why we should, and the cost of treating one another well and with respect, and what it means to live in a society that attempts to do that. And the people that the person that we should be listening to while we attempt to do that is a person who is against personal property, who said, give your money to the poor, and share with one another. And that would be Jesus Christ. So I think the left should do its work and actually reclaim the Bible for itself, and realize that the right-wingers are essentially heretics and frauds who don't actually read the book they clutch to, and to profess to know something about. Okay, that's the end of me, guys. Hope you're having a good time out there. Like, share, subscribe. I think I'm 1 subscriber away from 60. So if you're not subscribed, subscribe, because you'll make me really smile. And go say hi to your neighbors. All right. Have a good day, guys.